Excuse me, Mr. DJ.
Hey, check this out. We got a great show coming your way.
From the ECSI Sports Studios, it's the Midday Market Report with Jeff Dawson.
ECSI fans, you want to revolutionize your sports investing habits? Allow me to tell you about WagerWire. WagerWire is an app that helps you become a superior bettor by allowing you to sync all of your sports books and track all of your bets in one place. See your current action, your betting history, and stats. You can also sign up for sports books and collect bonus offers. Follow them at WagerWire on X, as they're the best account on the platform. Head to the App Store or Play Store now and search WagerWire to download the app.
Good evening, sports fans from all around the globe. I am the host, Jeff Dawson, East Coast Sports Investors, and this is your closing bell with Ron Marmalefsky, talking some NCAA football and NFL from a, I like to say, data and analytical standpoint. Love ending our week with Ron here. We're blessed and honored to have him for year 2 here. Shout out to our new partnership and sponsor, WagerWire. If you have not downloaded this app, please hurry over to Google Play and wherever you download the apps. It's free. And you'll be able to start tracking your bets, tracking your ROI, which is an amazing concept if you're not already doing it. Also, take a look at all the free offers and promos from the various sports books that are available to you in your state. Seeing that we are about a month and a week away from Christmas, what better way to create some flash cash, some second stream of income other than wagering, of course? Send an email to affiliates at wagerwire.com. Tell them JD from ECSI sent you. Travis, Zach, and the rest of their team will take good care of you. But enough from me. How about the star of this show, the one and only, Mr. Ron?
Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Jeff. Wow. We're talking about second half of the NFL season and 2 more regular games for NCAA. Time really goes by.
You know, I remember late February getting an email asking me to do a Patriots recap. And then I think 2 weeks later, finished up with a Philly recap. And obviously the door will be open this year if you need any help. But here we are. We came through August and September, November 17th. And as you said, 2 more weeks of college football and the NFL just flying by in week 11. I always start with college football, but I have to ask you 2 NFL questions before I circle back to college football. These injuries. I mean, we could talk till we're blue in the face. Last night, Mark Andrews, they're not officially saying done for the year, but he's done for the year. Joe Burrow, done for the year. I talk about the Thursday night games. It's not enough time for these NFL professional athletes to play a full game on Sunday and then to get their bodies ready on Thursday. From someone like yourself that does the data week to week, must be hard to keep up with all these injuries, Ron.
It's terrible, really. It's just such a physical game. You know, the genie's out of the bottle. We know that Thursday games aren't going away. We definitely need, for player safety's sake, 2 bye weeks instead of 1 bye week. We absolutely have to have it where if a team plays on a Thursday, maybe they didn't play that Sunday right before the Thursday. With 2 bye weeks, it would take some manipulation, but you can get it done for most teams. I think the NFL should take a long look at this. Just at quarterback alone, we've had 22 different starting quarterbacks, I think, already. It's some amazing number. That's usually the case due to a variety of reasons by the end of the year. It's not usually the case by week 10 or 11 in the NFL season. And the disparity between starting quarterbacks and some of the backups in this league, and what are there may be only 15 to 20 really good quarterbacks or people that you could trust in the NFL, even though we have 32 teams. And you're right, it makes for handicapping that much harder. And you just can't use a model by itself. You have to factor in these other human factors. How much is a quarterback worth? What the drop-off is going to be? How much tape there is on a quarterback? And that's just one position. You mentioned Andrews and so on. There, too much is going on. It takes a lot of study.
Lastly, in the NFL, till we circle back, you were very bullish on your data initially to start the year, even when the team had a couple losses. I'm talking about the Buffalo Bills, who lose the opening game in New York without Rodgers, basically, after the first drive. Put together 3 great wins very handily at home, and then traveled to Washington, and then put up another 40 spot against Miami. They travel to London and get blitzed by the Jaguars. Haven't been the same team since. 5-5. What is, in your eyes, what's wrong with Bills?
Wow. I think a lack of confidence. You could hear it in Josh Allen's audio clips. In fact, we just came off about a half an hour ago. Chris and Ted had some audio clips of Josh Allen. I was very unimpressed with that. To me, it showed a lack of confidence. It showed, how do we get this fixed? I don't know how we get this fixed. The play calling with McDermott has been hot and cold, mostly cold. He tends to put his quarterbacks in harm's way. And it's not just an offensive problem. You have a team that's allowing almost 7 out of every 10 passes to be complete. They've dealt with injuries like every team in the NFL, but they haven't compensated for those injuries. The AFC is brutal as it is. You have to bring your A game almost every week, or you're going to be tripped up. My opinion of Buffalo has certainly changed. The data has changed. So naturally, my opinion has changed. It's not a sure thing that they're going to make the playoffs. Yet by the same token, they could still win the division, believe it or not. It just doesn't look like they're going to be a number 1, number 2 seed, and maybe not even a number 3 seed. So it's a long road ahead for Buffalo.
That not just the loss that the Bengals suffered last night. Obviously, the loss of Joe Burrow. Nothing against Jake Browning. I was a big fan. He won me a lot of money when he was with Washington in college. But just an outsider looking in, I knew last year. I've said for the last 2 years, you have decent running backs, but I think you rather win on Josh Allen's arm and his legs instead of trying to establish a run. Last Monday, first drive, Cook gets the ball ripped right out of his hands. He's in the doghouse for the first quarter. There's no look. There's almost like he's shying away from Stephon Diggs. And then there's Gabe Davis, there's Shakir, at least the emergence of Dalton Kincaid. But my point here is on the final drive, they said, you know what, James, here you go. 9-yard run. And then the second run, he fumbles, happens to bounce back into his lap, and he runs for 50 yards. And Josh eventually wins it by running it in. My question to you, why are they so reluctant to establish a run, then pass?
The question should be phrased to McDermott, I think, because last year with a combination of Singletary and Cook, they did the same thing. There were games when they had an 80-20 pass to rush ratio. And when you have a dynamic running back like Cook, who has good yards per carry, he can handle the ball and get you yards in the reception. You should never stray away from that. You get too predictable when you force feed the ball to Diggs, or when you rely on your pass game completely. Even though Dalton Kincaid has emerged and he's what I call a hybrid tight end wide receiver, because he's not going to give you a lot of blocking as a rookie right now anyway. They're using him as a weapon. He's catching 4 to 5 or more balls per game. But they should not be a team that strays away from the run game, but they do. I think their play calling flow is flawed.
No, I agree 100%. And again, the one team that benefited the most from what happened yesterday is the Bills, sitting at 5-5. Think about a 6-7 point favorite this week. Must win, obviously, divisional game. We'll get back to the games on Sunday then. Going to circle over to the college ranks. I have to start here. I'm going to put you on the spot. A game that you and I have circled for weeks. Your alma mater, Oregon State, hosting the undefeated Washington Huskies. Once Heisman favorite, Penix Jr., now second favorite, only to Bo Nix of Oregon. Look ahead line, Oregon -6 versus Washington, potentially next week in the Pac-12, or 2 weeks in the Pac-12 championship there. We have had this, I have had this highlighted. This is the first loss of Washington. Now I'm seeing your alma mater 2-point favorites. I know you're going to be sitting back enjoying this game. Give us your thought process on this game. And are you a little nervous now that the whole world thinks that you're going to beat undefeated Washington?
All of that is true. But let me start by saying, if you really want my analysis, you get a 1-minute rant and then you get an actual game analysis. I hope it's my biggest hope that Washington loses 77-2, because I just hate the way the NCAA is falling apart before my eyes. The fact that you're going to have Cal and Stanford playing regularly at Wake Forest, and UCLA playing Rutgers and Maryland, and Oregon from a golf course saying that, no, we don't want to be part of the Pac-12, and Washington filing countersuit because we want to leave the conference and we want the money of the conference as well. It drives me crazy, and it's ruining the sport that I love. Okay, I got that out of the way now. So let's talk about the game. My power ratings say the game should be dead even. So there's no real advantage for Oregon State in the power ratings. The matchup analysis says that Oregon State could run at will in terms of, controlling the line of scrimmage, exposing Washington's defense, which is not as good as Oregon State's. There is a matchup analysis that does say that Penix will be able to throw for over 300 yards against Washington. Contrary to what others have said, I do believe that weather is not necessarily an advantage for Oregon State. And the reason I say that is because if there's rain, there's a lot of ball handling that goes in Oregon State's offense, whether it be DJ in the fake handoff, whether it be Martinez running, Fenwick running, and so on. There's not a lot of ball handling in the Washington offense. There's more chances for fumbles from Oregon State than from Washington. In a clean game, I think Oregon State, even with the power ratings being pick'em, would be the right side to play. Yes, I'm worried that they're liked by most everybody. I'm most hopeful that the referees do not decide this game, because in the last 3 Washington and Oregon State games, 2 won by Washington and one by Oregon State, all 3 were impacted by referee decisions. Regardless of what happens, I hope it's won or lost on the field.
Almost sounds like, a Patrick Mahomes or Tom Brady. How do you slow them down? Well, you keep the ball on offense and play keep away.
Correct.
So if you're able to move the change and establish the run game, which it looks like you're going to be able to, you get that 60-40. Your offense is on the field. You wear down their defense, and you keep Penix Jr. off the field.
Well, one thing, you can assess different stages of home field advantage. How much does a MAC team get a home field advantage in November when there's 6,000 fans in the stands versus this kind of game? Clearly, Oregon State plays very well at home. They're something like 16-1 to the point spread at home. in the last 17 games. So the crowd is going to be electric. It's just going to be an incredible atmosphere. Maybe you bump it up a point or so for home field advantage. They still have to win on the field. They still have to avoid penalties, pass interference penalties, and stuff like that. But you're right. If they can control the ball, not fumble the ball, and move the chains via the run game, their play calling has been exceptional this year. And if it continues, this could be Washington's first loss.
The time of the week for the popsicle headache, we're still, we know this is all going to play out. We know this is the last year of the Final Four. They're going to 12, a year late because, we're going to have issues on that final committee card here. We're setting up for an Alabama Georgia SEC final. Look ahead line is only Georgia -3. We're setting up for a Washington-Oregon rematch. The look ahead line, Oregon -6. That's a pretty big statement there. Texas, Oklahoma, I assume in the Big 12. Everyone's waiting for the easiest thing to happen is a Florida State loss, which we can't seem to find. Maybe a Florida State versus Louisville ACC championship. I don't know. But again, Ohio State, Michigan next week. Take me off the popsicle headache and just ease everyone's mind here. This is going to play out.
If Florida State runs the table, it's not going to play out. Somebody's going to be unhappy. There's just no getting around it. I mean, you have a 12-0, potentially 12-0 Michigan against 12-0 Ohio State. And maybe both of those teams deserve to get in. They're my two highest rated teams. But how do they fit them in when you have the SEC, Georgia against Alabama? You can't leave one of those teams out. You can't leave Oregon out if they run the table, or even Washington out. Well, certainly you can't leave Washington out if they run the table. So it's going to be a mess. It usually sorts itself out, but this year I have a feeling 5 is going to try to be divided into 4.
If we go back 2 years ago, Ron, an undefeated Georgia team versus a one-loss Alabama team, Georgia knew it didn't matter if they lost; they were going to be in that Final Four. Kind of good first half. Alabama wins in the second half and wins the game. SEC dominance. The committee, two-time defending champs, haven't lost in 3 years. The cry is going to be if Alabama beats them in that title game. Obviously, Alabama's in with the SEC title. How does a number 1 ranked Georgia team then fall 4 spots and be out of this tournament?
I think it's going to depend on margin of victory, and I think it's going to depend on Texas, Oklahoma. Texas hasn't looked great at times, but in reality, they outplayed Oklahoma ever so slightly. And I think that 12-1 Texas, if they were to avenge Oklahoma, might carry a little bit more meaning than a Georgia 10-point loss, let's say, against Alabama. Now, if it's really close, it could go in either direction. And then you have to worry about the Pac-12. But the Pac-12 has been so dominant this year. I know USC and UCLA are struggling right now, but they're still very, very good teams. Arizona is definitely ascending. Then you have Oregon State at number 10 or 11 in the nation, Oregon and Washington. The league has been recognized as being really strong this year, so they may not cannibalize themselves out of the playoffs. It's really going to come down to if Georgia loses, how much are they going to lose by?
Lastly, on this, the firing of Jimbo Fisher, we kind of knew that they were antsy. They're not afraid to cut a check, $70 million, whatever is owed to him. Hearing rumblings, obviously, at UCLA with Chip Kelly. Someone talked about a name called Lincoln Riley potentially could slip in the back door of A&M. Is that crazy to see or say, or was this guy just talking out of the side of his neck?
I hope it doesn't happen, because that would just magnify absolutely everything that's wrong with college football. You take the money, you get your mansion in Los Angeles, and then 2 years later you're going to leave because you get 3 mansions at Texas A&M, and you go back and you go to another new league from Oklahoma to USC to A&M. I don't put any stock in what you heard there, but if that happens, I would just be shaking my head again as to all the greed that's going on.
Not the greatest slates of college games this week. We talked about obviously Oregon State and Washington, which I obviously think is the headliner here. There's a game that the number looked light to me. I'm interested in your power rankings, and that's Georgia traveling to Knoxville in Tennessee, a Tennessee team that I think obviously got steamrolled last week in Missouri. I think was looking ahead to this game. The opening number I had was 10 with a 58. I'm seeing 9.5s across the board. In your power rankings, was that 10 or even 9.5 now too short in your power rankings for Georgia at Tennessee?
I bumped Georgia up with Brock Bowers coming back. I don't think he was at full strength last week, but just having him on the field really helped. So I got them back to where I would have had them before. And that puts them right there with Ohio State, 2-3, 3-2. And even with that, I have this game at 9. So I think that the number is correct by my standpoint. I still don't know what we're getting out of Tennessee's defense. There has been a drop-off between their quarterback last year and Milton this year. Offensively, I know they like to go fast. They like to move fast and so on. I just see it as an accurate number, and I don't have any edge in this game.
There's been a handful of games that have flip-flopped this week. We were talking about Louisville a few minutes ago. My true number was Louisville minus 2.5. I do now see in some spots at DraftKings right now, Miami minus 1. It is bouncing around from Miami to 1 to a pick to, let's say it's South Point right now, Louisville 1. Initial thoughts on Louisville at Miami this week?
Louisville has definitely overperformed my expectations. So I'm not one to want to go right in and say, I know what's going to happen in this game, because there are certain teams that I don't have a great handle on. My personal power ratings would have Miami as a full 3-point favorite. We know Miami sometimes folds its tent in November, and we know Louisville's doing a great job. The game's very important. Even though I think that according to my power ratings, they would be dead even on neutral ground. I just don't have an opinion on that game. I'm not going to have a lot of opinions on the major games. I have some hold your nose games this week. Last week was a time when we didn't get to talk, and I had a busy slate of football. I find this a fascinating game. I think Miami of Florida matches up decently against Louisville, but my rush stat numbers put this as pick 'em. So I'm not getting involved.
Well, let me follow up then. Let's hear some of the games that you might have a certain peak of interest, or some of your numbers and data that versus the board that might be skewed.
Okay. Boy, they're going to be ugly games, but take Nebraska, for example, especially when they were underdog by as much as 6 or 7 points. I talk a lot about turnover regression. We talked about that in the NFL about a half an hour ago, but it exists to a smaller extent in college. But when it's really skewed like Nebraska has a minus 15 turnover ratio this year. Each turnover is worth 3.75 points in the NFL. So you're talking about 52.5 points that they have flat out given away on turnovers. And Nebraska, with the data in their favor, all they need to do is hang on to the ball. And you're talking about, even at the current odds, which are what, roughly about 4.5? No, they're back up to 6, I see. Okay. So I just think that's too many points. And that's a game that I'm interested in because I don't think this version of Wisconsin should be given 6 to Nebraska. Do you run the risk that I'm wrong? Of course you run the risk that I'm wrong. People are wrong at least 40% of the time. What if Nebraska continues to turn it over? What if they're not getting anything out of their dismal quarterback play? But the bottom line is, if they just hand the ball off every play, they should be within 6 points because the running data supports them being a closer game. And the turnover data supports regression back to more of a plus even. So that would be the example of a game that's not on everybody's radar, but it's on mine.
The last game that I'll talk about that I'm kind of scratching my head here is probably the second pick on the draft this year, Drake May and North Carolina. They traveled to Clemson, who obviously, as we know, has had its issues this year. Dabo Sweeney fighting off the trolls. If you want my job, come get my job, kind of tongue in cheek. I'm seeing as high as 7.5, Ron. And that number to me, I mean, I know UNC struggles defensively, but is that number correct in your eye?
Yes, it is correct. Well, I should say not really. I would have this 8.5, even 9 points in terms of. I understand where the spread is coming. I was going to say it's correct. It's correct according to my line of scrimmage rushing data. I would favor Clemson by 7, but my power ratings would favor them by 1.5 or 2 points more. That Clemson should be a bigger favorite in this case. So I would probably lean Clemson just because if we have a healthy running back, I heard Shipley was a little bit banged up. If we have a healthy running back, it's going to be hard for North Carolina to get off the field. We saw that against Duke last week. That was one of the games I was late to the party last week. I realized that Duke was the right side a little too late, and I didn't want to take the reduced odds. Clemson is going to try to run the ball and shorten the game against North Carolina. There's no reason that they have to pass that much. And Clemson's defense is still fundamentally sound with what they got. I think Drake May's had a very good year, but he's not had an exceptional year. He has been prone to some turnovers. So I can't get involved in this game. It's kind of this is a nice game, but both teams aren't going as far as they wanted to go anyway. So, they'll try hard for this particular game. I could see this ending 7.
Going to switch back over to the NFL. I want to pull up a couple games for you here. Actually, as I'm closing out the college slate, the one game that kind of caught my eye, I talk every week to you about that, is this Arizona team, and hats off to them. It's an amazing story in the Pac-12, what they've done. Their defense has been fabulous. In comes a Utah team that got beat up pretty good at Washington. I thought I would see a higher number, Ron, with Arizona. I say this tongue in cheek. I'd feel more respected if Arizona was 2.5, almost 3-point favorites. Yet at a pick 'em, I'm almost telling myself this screams Utah. How do you feel about Utah traveling to Arizona this week?
Yeah, I understand your feeling on that. I said it. Actually, the odds that my power ratings set it at 1. Arizona 1, so it's not too far off. I personally set it at 2.5 because the situational spot is all for Arizona. They have line of scrimmage data. Utah is an average team offensively that beats up on some teams when they have that rushing advantage, when they can extol their will. They're expertly coached, but they come off. This is their second of back-to-back road games. They're very disappointed with how they played last week. Situationally, I like Arizona in this game.
All right. Travel on down to the NFL. Not the greatest of slates for the NFL. I guess I can just quickly talk about this. Next week, the Patriots play the Giants, both most likely 2-win teams. It's the potential Drake May Bowl there. I saw someone said that the Patriots were 5-point favorites against the Giants. God bless them. I can't believe Patriots 5-point favorites over anyone. Patriots travel to Germany last week. Hats off to Mr. Saylor and the Colts. They get it done. Thoughts on the Patriots and their spiraling, enjoying the week off, but I don't know what to say. I don't know if you have any parting thoughts on the Patriots.
It's a bad year for the Patriots, and they're not getting anything out of their offense. There's no creativity. There's no trust in their receivers. Their running backs run slow. They're using their tight ends, but they're not as their best weapon, probably. Maybe they get some health back on the offensive line with this break. I will tell you, if DeVito is the quarterback for the New York Giants, this is the lock of the week. I don't go with locks, but so this is my lock of the week. If you like Iowa games in college, you'll love New York Giant New England games with DeVito at quarterback versus what New England has at quarterback. The over-under should be set at 20.5 or something like that, pending turnovers. I mean, this will be one of the lowest scoring sets you'll ever see if that happens, because the Giants will have some pride defensively, but they'll have nothing offensively, and New England will be content to run the ball 45 times. Ugly, ugly game. The Giants are in spin control, and New England's even worse than that.
Looking at the card, initially Pittsburgh, Cleveland looked like a great game. I had a 4 with a 38. Now, of course, no Deshaun Watson, basically a pick 'em there at 33. The Chargers traveled to Green Bay. That's it now. Chargers favored by 3. I thought, hey, listen, 41-38, I get it. Their defense, which is they've spent a lot of money on, just couldn't stop Detroit, and Detroit comes in with a 41-38 win there. Chargers at Green Bay, a 4-5 Charger team, obviously needing this win to get back to 500 to save any playoff hopes. Any hope the Chargers leave Lambeau Field with a win?
There's always hope, because Jordan Love is a quarterback of Green Bay, and he does tend to turn the ball over. The problem I have with the Chargers is they have a +8 turnover ratio, and that I don't know if it regresses this week because it's Jordan Love on the other side of the ball, but I don't have a long-term faith in the LA Chargers because they have to get everything else right, because that turnover ratio has probably hit its ceiling. We're probably not going to see more than, at the end of the year, I'd be surprised if it remained at +8. Maybe they get a bonus in this week. I think the Chargers are fully capable of exposing Green Bay through the air. Green Bay has an average defense by my numbers that I'm looking at right now. The Chargers have a below average defense by what I'm looking at. So I expect Jordan Love to have some success if he throws to his own team. I think the line is accurate. I would have made it by my power ratings 3.5, but I would never give 3.5 in a situation. I do not like giving more than a field goal or even a field goal with teams that I think have lower half defenses, and the Chargers have lower half defenses.
Like I said, not a great slate this week. You got Chicago traveling to Detroit. By all this, my true number was 10 with a 47 down to 7.5 and a 48. Assumption is obviously Justin Fields returns there. Dolphins 10-point favorites versus the Raiders. Dallas 10-point road favorites at Carolina. San Francisco 12-point favorites at home versus Tampa. Any shot any one of those three lays an egg and gets picked off and destroys the Circa Survivor contest?
Well, I can't back the New York Giants just because of their quarterback play, but there's no reason to believe Washington would actually win by 10 because they're a flawed team. I could see closer than expected scores in some of these. Tampa Bay, I hand it to Baker Mayfield. He's doing a wonderful job. I like the way Tampa Bay's playing, but they're going against my top NFL team right now, and a lot of people's top NFL team when they're fully healthy in San Francisco. I do think Carolina will give Dallas a game because it's a sandwich situation for Dallas between two divisional games on the road and having to play on a short week Thursday because it's their annual Thanksgiving game. Whether Carolina can pull off the upset win, that's asking a lot. But if I had to pick from all of those, I would pick Carolina.
Well, I'm going to save the best for last. Monday night. Actually, let me step back for 1 second. Joshua Dobbs, what he has done is just they should just create some kind of award for this guy. Not one, not two, but three teams now. We go from Cleveland to Arizona, now Minnesota. The potential return of Justin Jefferson versus the Denver Bronco team that is kind of really woken up. The Javonte Williams starting to get some traction. Jerry Jeudy nowhere to be found, but Cortland Sutton has taken on his number one wide receiver in my eyes. The reemergence of Russell Wilson. Quick thoughts on Denver and Minnesota Sunday night.
Sneaky good game. Two teams that certainly feel they're in the playoff mix based on recent performance, Denver included with 3 in a row. What I like about Minnesota is Dobbs brings something different to the table. Kirk Cousins was obviously not a running quarterback. If you're using past information to scheme against Minnesota, you're in trouble because Minnesota is a different team with a mobile quarterback. So it creates a variable that wasn't there before, which excites me. And Brian Flores, quietly, as defensive coordinator for Minnesota, has got them to play better football. Also, quietly, Russell Wilson, even though he's getting sacked a lot, is not turning the ball over as much via interception, has a tremendous TD to interception ratio. And ever so quietly, Sean Payton is having an impact on his performance. And I think that should go recognized. I mean, I think that's a very important point. You mentioned Javonte Williams. He is a very big part of the game plan. They would love to run him 15 to 20 times every single game. Their defense still has flaws, but it's improving ever so slightly. Very important game for both teams. And I like the mindset of both teams at this point. And that's what you're looking for in the NFL at this time of the season. Who's shrugging their shoulders and who's saying, we can do this, we could do this.
Monday night, the Super Bowl revenge game, rematch, however we want to coin this. Philadelphia travels to Kansas City. My true number was Kansas City -3 with a 48. Basically right now 2.5 with the 45 across the Vegas Strip and at the Circa as we speak. Initially Vegas had this 24-21 Kansas City. Your thoughts, your breakdown on the rematch of last year's Super Bowl?
From Philly's sake, I think they would rather play this as a Sunday afternoon game. When you have a Monday night game and Pat Mahomes is in the building, it creates that extra atmosphere. Okay, maybe Taylor Swift has some extra atmosphere in there too, but I'm not going in that direction. Sorry for bringing it up. But I think there's something special about Pat Mahomes, and yet my matchup indicators slightly favor Philly in this game in the rematch. I'm curious to see what happens with Jalen Hurts with 2 weeks off. A lot of people have speculated that he's not been 100%. He's not running as much. He's favoring something's going on. I don't know if 2 weeks cures that or doesn't cure that, but I know this game has been circled on their calendar. So I think you're going to get Hurts's best effort, even if that means running 7, 8, 9, 10 times like he used to do everything and anything possible to get this done. Philly's going to make it more difficult for Kansas City, I think, in the red zone. I think Philly matches up in the red zone. I think Mahomes would be better off trying to create big plays in this game as opposed to methodically going down the field. I know that's not a popular take, but it's my take that I think the red zone, Philly will be better off than people think. I slightly lean to Philly at 2.5. I would possibly make it a play at Philly at +3. Again, Monday night doesn't excite me that you get Holmes in the spotlight, but the matchup indicators certainly favor Philly.
In your mindset here, who has the edge at defense? I know the Kansas City defense has surprisingly been real good this year in getting stronger week by week. Philly with a couple injuries, a couple guys now on the IR, especially in the fantasy world, used to be a cash cow, playing well this year, but haven't got a lot of those pick sixes or anything like that like they have in the past couple of years. Who has the edge at defense, Ron?
Overall, and surprisingly so, compared to what I would have thought at the beginning of the year with free agency losses and so on, Kansas City has a slight edge defensively in this game. Now, they can be run on, and that's that situation where how healthy is Hurts, because a combination of Hurts and Swift and everybody else in terms of how they piece together this run game could make a weakness a strength. I mean, it could expose Kansas City in terms of defending the run. But if you ask me overall, Kansas City has actually outperformed Philadelphia in terms of getting to opposing quarterbacks, which could be a problem if Jalen Hurts has to drop back in obvious passing situations. And they've done a very nice job defending the pass as well. So the trick for Philly, if they want to change the narrative, is to win on the early downs.
The headline on Tuesday morning reads, DeAndre Swift, not the Swifties, defeat Kansas City. How's that one?
Okay. Well, I mean, especially if I end up with Philly, I'm going to buy that newspaper.
As we always end, Ron, with that nice little 8-yard button hook, I like to throw you the final stage and the closing thoughts, if you have any, for this week for all the watchers and listeners.
Just a couple of minor things I thought of in terms of this being the next to last week of the college season. Next week is rivalry week, and if you do power ratings like I do, sometimes you have to take a slight step back in power ratings because typically you're not going to get full value at that point. It's it's a team's big game. Army wants to beat Navy. Navy wants to beat Army. Those kinds of situations. So across the country, when you see some rivalry games, some of them are happening this week, but a line that should be 10 might be 7, for example. So you're going to see some of that. So don't be afraid to look closer into the detail when you're doing your power ratings. Because, it could be that that's their last game. They're 4-7. We know they're not going to a bowl. Keep that in mind versus teams that are 7-4 and they are going to a bowl and you think they should be favored by 12, but they're only favored by 9. There's a reason for that because there might be a motivational factor for the other team in a rivalry game. NFL-wise, we have 3 games on Thursday. We have 1 game on Black Friday for the first time. That means 8 teams are going to have short weeks. So I would say keep that in mind as well. As you're watching the games this Sunday, keep in mind which teams are doing timeshare management at running back, wide receiver, whatever other positions they're doing to prepare for next week. What coaches aren't taking that into account at all because maybe they don't know how to take into account. There's a few extra variables that you're dealing with 8 teams on short weeks. Take some notes as to what those 8 teams are doing this Sunday.
And I started smiling. I am blessed and honored on Friday, December 8th, and Saturday, December 9th. Myself and Anthony Pepe and Sports Map Radio will be at Gillette this year, Radio Row on Friday, and doing the Army Navy game. I've never been to an Army Navy game. It's always been at Annapolis. And this year it's at Gillette. And Anthony reached out in Sports Map Radio if I wanted to be a part. And so I'll be sending lots of snapshots on Friday and Saturday and being a part of an Army Navy game, which I'm still shocked that I will be at my first Army Navy game.
I am going to really enjoy talking to you after that game and getting your feedback, because it's probably going to be a goosebump moment, and congratulations on being able to go to that game.
I'm almost in tears. I said to Anthony, I was like, don't mind me, but I'm probably going to have tears of joy to be a part of such a special occasion. I'm still in shock about it. We're going to Radio Row and the Super Bowl as well, and I'm more excited for the Army Navy game than being a part of Radio Row and the Super Bowl.
What's good about college football? At least there's something.
From myself, Jeff Dawson at EC Sports Invest, from the legend himself, Mr. Ron Marmalefsky at Ron A Sports. We wish everyone a blessed evening. The weekend's here. Enjoy the football, and we'll be back on Wednesday, God willing. It's a short week. It's Thanksgiving week, and myself and Ron will try to do our best to be back here at 5 my time, 2 his time on Wednesday. But till then, everyone, enjoy yourselves. Have a great weekend.